Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys. I'm on my way now to the machine shop. I'm going to be picking up the block, the head, and the crank. I'm bringing a new head gasket so he can measure it out for me so he can give me a better idea of what my compression ratio is going to be. I bought some 9-to-1 compression ratio pistons. Stock is 8.5-to-1. The reason I'm going I'm trying to aim for 9.5-to-1. He suggested I buy 9-to-1 because of the 1J head and the 2J bottom. The combustion chamber is slightly different due to the head design. So with that being said, he's going to measure the head gasket. He's going to, add that to the volume of the cylinder itself and see what my compression ratio is going to be. So that way I know what to expect, what fuel I can run, how hard I can push it. If I go like 10-to-1, I can only run E85. Anything above like 15 psi. So with 93, we're going to keep it at a super low boost setting, probably about, I don't know, 15 psi or something, just to keep that safe. And then with the ethanol sensor from the Haltech ECU, I can when I run E85, it'll change the map to a high boost setting, which will probably be like, I don't know, 24, 25 psi. So we're finally back at the garage. Time to get unloaded, put it on the engine stand, lay everything out. This is seriously really exciting for me. I absolutely love this. It's like Legos, like Christmas. What I want to do now is basically I'm going to size these piston rings that I have for my new Carrillo pistons. These pistons are 20 thousandths over, and they give you a compression ratio of about 9-to-1. So with the head gasket and the 1J cylinder head, supposedly it'll bring me closer to the 9.5-to-1 that I was looking for. But I already marked this basically for which side is forward. The intake side, which is this right side over here, which is the left side sitting from the driver's seat. So the bigger intake reliefs go on the intake side, and this is the exhaust side. So I marked them all already, and basically what I'm going to do now is get the piston rings and grind them to whatever specification it calls for. So before I start sizing the piston rings, these are the actual piston rings themselves. They come new in the box with the pistons. If you look closely, you can kind of see an N. If it's not out of focus, you'll see an N. So that indicates that this side goes up. This one also has an N. That side will go up as well, towards the top of the piston. So let me drop the first piston ring in. So to do that, you slide it in nice and even. All right, and grab your piston, center it with the piston, so that way you have it centered correctly. And you can see here that the gap is very tight. So with that being said, that's probably not even 5 thousandths clearance in there. So I'm gonna have to gap these rings. Obviously you can't have it that tight with the heat and expansion and everything. The rings will butt together, it'll expand and start to wipe the cylinder walls of the oil coating on there, and you've basically just created a honing machine. So let me pull out the ring grinder and I'll show you guys how you grind the ring. So kind of silly, but I don't really have a table vise. So this table is obviously too flimsy, and I found a hole in the car. So I ran a through bolt through my crash bar, which there was already a hole there for the, what do you call it? The tow hook. So I have it mounted here. I think that'll do for now. So let me grind this first ring down. So far I've grinded a bit of the piston ring. I'm going very slow and making sure I don't take too much out of it. Right now I have an 18 thousandths feeler gauge. And so what I'm going to do now is you can confirm that 18 thousandths goes in that little hole there. A little opening. Oh my god, I'm shaking so much. So 18 thousandths goes in the hole there. And that's with the piston ring squared in the hole. So that's how you square it. So always double check and make sure the ring is squared by putting a piston in. Let me do this with my right hand this time. So we have 18 thousandths sticking through there. It seems to be rubbing a little bit, so I'm gonna go a little bit more. So I'm making sure the ring is center with using the skirt, since the skirt pretty much is just about the diameter of the hole. It keeps it center. So this one is supposed to be 25 thousandths. So I have to pull out the 25 thousandths feeler gauge here. So it doesn't fit. So we have to grind that one down. So pull it out. Bring it over to the piece here. So we grinded some down. We want to take our time with this. Feeler gauge again. Still a little bit tight. Clean it off. Feel a little burr, so I have a little file here so I can clean off any burrs. Let's see if it goes in. It's starting to. There it is. So I'm just gonna double check it again. Piston, make sure it's at 0. Good. Feeler gauge. And we have the clearance. Okay, so here we're going to assemble the piston and get it ready for the engine. These are the circlips that retain the actual pin, the wrist pin. So since I can't install the wrist pin at the very moment, I'm going to install the circlip on one side only. That way, whenever I go to push the pin in, it has a stop on the other side and doesn't go all the way through. So this is the compression, the first compression ring. It has an N indication on the very top. This N is going to face up into the cylinder head. So that's going to be that one. This is the second compression ring. It is also annotated on top that this is up, as for the N. If you look at it from a side profile, it has kind of a edge to, I believe, scrape the oil off the cylinder walls. Okay, so we have the oil control ring spring in, and we're basically going to put that opening. So opening for this one, we're going to put it right about here. And the oil control ring, we're going to put 90 degrees from there. Second ring that way. Okay, so we can roll this one on into place. We're going to put that one on top. This control ring is a little different than what I'm used to. So we're going to set the opening for the control ring there. The spring, we're going to rotate it 90 degrees from the opening here, right? And then the other one, the second ring, we're going to put 90 degrees the opposite way. So the ring's opening will be 180 from each other, but 90 degrees from the opening of the actual spring. For the second piston ring, I'm going to use the ring expander. That way I don't have any twisting motion going on when I install it. So make sure I use it right. Grab the right spot. Okay, so we're going to only expand it as much as we need to get it into the second spot there. Okay, so that's there. So we're going to put this one 180 from forward. So that ring is over here. This is forward, down there. And the first ring, with the end up, we're going to put that one over here. It's a little bit more ductile so you can work it down. There it goes. Just piston number 4. Now we just keep doing that the whole way down. So before I started putting these bearings in, I actually made sure that the mating surface was clean. No oil, no debris or anything that could possibly get wedged in between the bearing and the metal itself. That way nothing goes out of round and everything should stay good. So these are the thrust bearings. These go on the middle. So that's going to be that one. What I'll do is I'll put some assembly lube on here so it's nice and tacky and it'll get stuck and it won't fall off. Here we have some of the assembly lube. Stick it in place. Okay. Looking good. So now with all the bearings in place, I can pretty much put the crank in. But before I do that, I'm going to put some assembly lube on the actual journals where the crank will ride. That way it goes in lubricated. So we're going to put some here. So we're just going to spread that out so it's all over the surface. That way the crank will slide right in. We'll have no problem. So just to reiterate, we have all the main bearings in. We have the thrust washers in place and set. So we're going to get the crank ready to drop in. Want to make sure the thrust bearings are in and good. So we're looking good. So we're now starting the assembly for the main caps. So you have to put some assembly lube on the inside here. 6 faces the number side up towards the crank. Place that in there. Number 4 is the one that takes the actual thrust bearing, so we're going to set that here now. Some assembly lube there. So there we've got the bearings. They're going to go in place there. Next we're starting to put the bolts in for the main caps. I'm putting motor oil on the threads so that way the threads actually get lubricated the whole way down and we get a smooth torque reading. We're just going to slowly bring these down. So we're now going to be torquing the main caps. They take 33 foot-pounds and then 90 degrees. So we're going to start off by torquing to 33 foot-pounds. So now that they're all torqued to 33 foot-pounds, now I need to turn it 90 degrees. So I'm going to start from the center. Basically what you're going to do is give this a rotation of 90 degrees. So I'm going to start here. It's tight. 90. You can see that turned 90 degrees there. So we have visual confirmation that all the bolts are turned 90 degrees from their torqued location. So here you'll see we have 90 degrees from where we initially started, so we're good there. Next thing I'll do is make sure the crank still spins by hand, and it does. So that's a good indication. Nothing is binding or fighting. So now that the crank is in, I can put the oil pump on and I can put the rear main seal on. So we're cleaning up the area where the oil pump is going to go onto before we actually go and get it ready to put it on. Making sure there's no sealant left on the actual mating surfaces. Clean basically these little grooves where the sealant will go into, so the RTV will keep the oil from seeping out of the cover itself. So I'm just here cleaning it. I have a little flathead screwdriver. I'm not exactly sure if there's a better method to do this, but you just kind of sit there and scrape away at the RTV. So it takes some time, but it's part of the process. All right, so we picked up the rods from Total Engine Concepts, and they basically honed it after torquing it with the new ARP hardware. That way, any distortion that is caused by the hardware will be taken out. So here we have the rods. The bearings are inside of the piston box there. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start getting ready to put the pistons in place into where they go. So let's put number 1 and number 6 the lowest possible spot down there, so we have no interference. So we're going to do 1 and 6, then 2 and 5, and then 3 and 4. So here we go. So we're going to start to put the so right now we're going to start mating the piston to the actual rod itself. So here we have the piston. So we're going to put some assembly lube in the bores, both sides. We're going to spread it in the hole. We're going to put some on the pin itself. Arrow facing forward. And we have the oil squirter here, so it sprays up towards the piston itself. So forward is going to be trailing. So here we go. Slide the pin in. Should slide in by hand. Now we're going to double check the ring alignment. So I want the number 1 compression ring facing forward, number 2 facing back. So this here is the piston ring compressor. They have other ones where it's just a sleeve. You slide the piston into the sleeve and that way it will compress. This is the cheaper option that they have online. So if you don't have the means of buying I forget how much it is. I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it's a significant amount of money where this is the cheapest and best option at times. So we're going to set this over, tighten. I'm going to set the piston down into the hole. So we have the torque wrench ready here. I started off with 25 foot-pounds initially, and then now I'm going over to 50. Okay, looking good. So I actually went and checked the calibration of this torque wrench, and it was a little off. So I went and got it calibrated. I retorqued the actual rods themselves, and so everything should be good now. Now what I'm doing is putting on the upper oil pan. So we're just getting all the hardware ready. We're just gonna be doing it together. So now we just zap them down. Typically like to hand tighten them, make sure I'm not going too far over with the gun. Because with the gun, it's, you know, unless it's a calibrated impact gun where it's actually got like a little torque setting, you don't really know how tight you're going with it. So I'd rather do all this by hand and make sure I'm not going to strip out any of the hardware. This is what's called torque seal. So basically the way to use torque seal is once someone torques something, the inspector will come behind you and he will mark from the head of the bolt or the nut to the actual to the frame or oil pan or whatever it is. So you'll go from the bolt to the oil pan, and if any movement happens, the torque seal basically will indicate that it has rotated. So I'm only putting it on the external surfaces. I don't want it to be inside of the engine. So, you know, because this basically hardens into a little like paste. So if any movement or anything happens, it cracks and it falls off or whatever it might happen if anything comes loose. So the outside will be a clear indication of whatever's going on inside, so I'll be okay with that. So what's up next is the, I think it's called the splash tray. Not exactly sure, but one thing the machine shop told me to do prior to closing the oil pan is to supply oil through the feed here, fill it up so the cavity where the oil pump sucks oil through is primed with oil. Now I don't know what will happen once I flip the engine over. I don't know if what's in the oil pump will come out and back into the oil pan, or if it'll stay primed. So we're hoping that it'll stay primed so that way on the first start we don't have to wait at all to see any oil pressure. That'll already have oil in the oil pump and we'll have pressure immediately. Little cavity. It's gonna fucking everywhere. Luckily this is the oil pan, so we have oil all the way to the top of the opening there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin the oil pump so that way it sucks down the oil. Oops. Okay, we have oil coming out through the oil filter, so we're good. That's primed right there. Okay, so the splash plate and the pickup is installed. When you put the pickup on, make sure you put the gasket on. If you don't have a gasket on there, and let's say there's a leak at this spot, if you have a straw and you have a hole in the straw and you try and suck through that straw, the pressure is going to be released through that hole, so you don't get a good suction through the straw. So basically what's going to happen is, if this gasket isn't here, there's a hole here basically. So with it trying to pump the oil through the pump, there's going to be an open area and the pressure is going to get lost through this little opening here. So the better seal that you have here, the better flow of oil that you're going to have sucking through the pickup to the oil pump. So now the next thing to do is, now that everything is installed, the plate and the pickup, now I can go and put the lower oil pan on. Then you can see the way that you put the RTV is you go on the inside of every hole. That way you seal it from leaking out. We're letting that get a little tacky before we slap it on there. Okay, so it's flipped over and ready for assembly on the bottom end. So since I torqued all these already, I pretty much just put torque seal on it. That way I can make sure all the bolts that I have touched are torqued. Just now I installed the dowel pins that go on the block itself. These dowel pins are easy to mushroom supposedly, so something that people recommend to do is get a bolt, a nut that's a wide face, and then hammer it that way. That way you don't hit an edge or mushroom it in or anything like that. So we're pretty much ready for the head to go on now. Head gasket, everything lines up. So this is the 1J GTE head gasket. You can see how everything lines up. There's a hole there, everything's pretty good. These are the water jackets. This is the intake side water jacket opening. It progressively gets bigger as you go back. That's the number 6 cylinder, more than you would number 1. So you can see here the holes get a little bit bigger, and that's about it for that. This is the oil feed over here. So this is going to be the oil feed to the head. So this pretty much concludes the video for the rotating assembly. Next video is going to be installing the cylinder head, checking the clearances on the actual buckets to the cams, and finishing up the cylinder head and all the accessories that bolt onto it. If you guys like these videos, please let me know. I'm gonna be doing one for the BMW once I get that going, so hopefully I'll be able to get the good mixture going with the driving content and building content, because I know building isn't always fun and entertaining as whatever to watch, so driving is going to be definitely something to watch. But yeah guys, stay tuned. Next video will be coming out soon. Just stay alert for the next video.